Welcome back to the channel everyone, and thank you for joining today, because what we are about to explore is one of the most fascinating, controversial, and imagination-capturing stories in modern American coin collecting, a story that blends documented minting practices, genuine known errors, speculative possibilities, collector psychology, auction mythology, and the way a single ordinary-looking coin like the 1980D or 1980p Washington quarter dollar can, under extremely rare circumstances, be rumored, discussed, and sometimes even advertised as being worth up to $17 million, a figure so shocking that it instantly pulls people into the world of numismatics. And while that number represents an extreme upper edge of theoretical or legendary valuation rather than a routinely confirmed sale, the reasons behind why such a claim can exist at all lie in a deep and complex web of mint errors, transitional anomalies, die varieties, metal composition mysteries, strike abnormalities, historical context, survival rates, and the powerful influence of collector demand, grading, provenance, and uniqueness, because the 1980 quarter was produced at a moment when the United States Mint was operating at high speed, recovering from the inflation-heavy 1970s, balancing cost efficiency with mass production, and transitioning technologies that created fertile ground for mistakes. And to understand how a single 1980D or 1980p quarter could theoretically reach a value discussed in the millions, one must first appreciate that coins are not simply money but historical artifacts, industrial products, and cultural symbols all rolled into one. And when something goes wrong during their creation in a way that produces a one-of-a-kind or near one-of-a-kind result, the value equation changes entirely, because rarity multiplied by demand multiplied by story equals price. And the story of the 1980 quarter begins with the fact that it was struck in copper-nickel clad composition intended for circulation, yet collectors have long speculated about the possibility of experimental planchets, wrong metal strikes, or leftover alloy blanks from previous or parallel testing programs finding their way into production presses, a phenomenon that has occurred in other years and denominations, and which, if proven for a 1980 quarter, especially one struck on a silver, gold, or exotic alloy planchet, would instantly elevate that coin into the realm of legendary errors. Because wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable in all of numismatics, especially when the metal content itself is valuable or historically significant, and if such a coin were combined with other dramatic errors such as an off-center strike exceeding 50%, a double or triple strike with rotation, or a broad strike without a retaining collar, the uniqueness would compound exponentially. And then there is the matter of mint marks, because the 1980D quarter from Denver and the 1980p quarter from Philadelphia represent two different production environments, with Denver known for high output and Philadelphia undergoing modernization and quality control adjustments at the time, and this opens the door to mint-specific anomalies like missing mint marks, repunched mint marks, over mint marks, or even mint marks punched on the wrong side of the coin, which, while extremely rare for quarters of this era, are not theoretically impossible. And when collectors imagine a coin that combines a missing or misplaced mint mark with dramatic die errors such as double dies, especially a strong double die obverse affecting Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or Washington's profile, the mental image becomes one of a coin that would immediately be recognized as special by anyone who knows what to look for. And double dies are particularly important because they are created at the die creation stage rather than during striking, meaning every coin struck from that die carries the error. But if the die is quickly removed or fails early, only a tiny number of examples may exist, making them exceptionally valuable. And in the case of a hypothetical 1980 quarter double die of extreme magnitude, the rarity could approach single digits, especially if most examples were lost to circulation before discovery, and value increases further when we consider die breaks, cuds, retained cuds, and shattered dies, which occur when a die develops cracks or missing sections, producing raised blobs of metal on the finished coin. And while minor cuds are relatively common and modestly valued, massive cuds that distort major design elements are far rarer and far more desirable, particularly when they create dramatic visual impact. And then there is the intriguing possibility of a mule error, which occurs when the obverse die of one coin is paired with the reverse die of another denomination or design. An error so rare and shocking that it often becomes instantly famous. And while no confirmed 1980 quarter mule has been officially recognized involving a radically different reverse, The theoretical possibility of a mismatched die pairing during a chaotic production run is one of the reasons collectors continue to search rolls and collections decades later, because history has proven that some of the most valuable coins ever discovered were found years after their creation, hiding in plain sight. And beyond die pairing, there are alignment errors to consider, such as rotated dies where the obverse and reverse are not properly aligned, creating rotation errors that, when extreme, can command significant premiums, especially if combined with other errors. And speaking of combinations, it is the stacking of errors that often leads to the highest values, because a coin with one error may be rare, but a coin with 3 or 4 major errors becomes exponentially rarer. And when collectors talk about a $17,001,980 quarter, they are usually envisioning an almost mythical specimen that combines wrong metal composition, extreme double die features, dramatic strike errors, pristine condition, and impeccable provenance, perhaps even traced back to a specific mint batch or discovered under unusual circumstances, because provenance matters immensely at the top end of the market, and a coin that can be documented, photographed, graded by a top-tier grading service, and publicly displayed gains legitimacy that fuels bidding wars. And condition plays a crucial role too, because even the rarest error loses value if heavily worn, whereas a mint state or proof-like example with full luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks becomes a showpiece. And in the case of the 1980p quarter, there is also discussion about proof-like business strikes and special mint set quality anomalies, where coins intended for circulation exhibit unusually reflective fields or sharp strikes, suggesting experimental polishing or die preparation. And while these alone may not produce million-dollar values, they add another layer to the narrative of a year where unusual things could and did happen. And the psychology of collectors must also be considered, because markets are driven not only by objective rarity but by belief, desire, and competition. And when influential collectors or dealers promote the idea that a certain coin could be worth an extraordinary sum, interest spikes, searches increase, and the mythos grows, sometimes outpacing hard evidence. Yet this myth-building is not entirely baseless, because history is full of coins once thought impossible that later surfaced and rewrote price guides, and this keeps hope alive that somewhere a unique 1980 quarter exists that truly deserves a place among the most valuable coins ever made. And another angle that fuels high valuations is the concept of transitional errors, where design, metal, or process changes overlap. And while 1980 is not known for an official quarter transition, the late 1970s and early 1980s saw experimentation in materials and cost-saving measures, and any documented example of a quarter struck on an experimental or unauthorized planchet would instantly become historic. And then there is the possibility of intentional or accidental wrong denomination strikes, such as a quarter struck with dies intended for a different face value, or struck on a blank meant for a foreign coin, which has occurred in other years and denominations. And such a coin would not only be rare but also tell a story about global mint operations and shared equipment. And when we zoom out and look at the broader market context, we see that multi-million-dollar coin sales are not unheard of, with unique gold coins, pattern pieces, and historic errors commanding staggering sums. So the idea that a quarter could reach such heights is not impossible in principle, only extraordinarily unlikely, requiring a perfect storm of factors. And this is why the 1980 D&P quarter continues to capture imaginations, because it represents the tantalizing possibility that something extraordinary could emerge from the ordinary, that a coin most people overlook could hold secrets worth fortunes. And this belief drives roll hunters, estate buyers, and collectors to keep searching, examining mint marks, weighing coins, checking edge reading, inspecting lettering under magnification, and learning about minting processes so they can recognize anomalies when they appear. And even if the legendary $17 million example remains hypothetical, the pursuit itself adds value to the hobby, educating people, preserving history, and occasionally rewarding persistence with genuine discoveries worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in that sense, the story of the 1980 quarter is less about a single confirmed sale and more about the intersection of rarity, possibility, and human curiosity. Next, 1985 D quarter dollar. Today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about and mysterious modern coin legends, the incredible story of the 1985 D Washington quarter dollar, a coin that most people have spent without a second thought, a coin that still sits quietly in old jars, drawers, and collections. Yet one that under extraordinary circumstances has been discussed in collector circles as having a theoretical value reaching as high as $16 million, and while that figure represents the absolute extreme edge of rarity, uniqueness, and possibility rather than a routine market price, the reasons behind such a staggering valuation lie in a powerful combination of minting errors, production mistakes, transitional anomalies, and collector demand that transform an everyday 25-cent piece into a once-in-a-generation numismatic phenomenon. Because coins are not merely currency, they are industrial products made at incredible speed by human-designed machines, and whenever systems operate at that scale, errors become inevitable, and occasionally those errors escape into circulation, where decades later they are rediscovered and re-evaluated under the intense scrutiny of modern collectors, graders, and historians. And the year 1985 is especially intriguing because it sits in the middle of a high-volume production era at the Denver Mint, a time when millions upon millions of quarters were struck to meet public demand, presses ran relentlessly, dies wore down quickly, quality control was focused on output rather than perfection, and the perfect environment existed for rare and dramatic mistakes to occur, mistakes that if combined in a single surviving coin could elevate its value to unimaginable heights, beginning with one of the most powerful drivers of value in modern U.S. coinage, the wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, composition, or even a foreign coin, and while the standard 1985 D quarter was supposed to be struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet weighing about 5.67 grams, history has shown that wrong metal strikes do happen, including quarters struck on silver planchets, experimental alloy blanks, or even gold-toned planchets used for testing or foreign contracts. And if a verified 1985 D quarter were discovered struck on an unauthorized precious metal planchet with full design detail, proper diameter mismatch, and confirmed mint origin, it would instantly become one of the most important error coins ever known, especially if the metal itself carried significant intrinsic value, because such a coin would not only be rare but unique, and uniqueness is the foundation of multi-million-dollar valuations, and when collectors imagine a $16,001,985 quarter, they often imagine exactly this type of scenario. A wrong metal strike combined with pristine condition and unquestionable authentication, and then there are double die errors, which occur during the die creation process when design elements are misaligned between impressions, resulting in visible doubling on the finished coin, and double dies are especially valuable because they are not caused by post-strike damage but are true mint errors, and a strong double die obverse on a 1985 D quarter affecting Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or Washington's portrait would be instantly recognizable, and if the die were used briefly before being retired, only a tiny number of examples might exist, and rarity on that scale drives prices into the stratosphere, particularly if the doubling is dramatic and easily visible without magnification, and the value multiplies further when such a double die is paired with a double die reverse, something exceedingly rare but not impossible, creating a coin that shows doubling on both sides, a feature that collectors dream about and aggressively compete for. And beyond double dies there are dramatic strike errors to consider, such as off-center strikes where the design is not fully centered on the planchet, and while minor off-center strikes are relatively common, extreme examples exceeding 50% off-center while still showing a full date and mint mark are far rarer, and when such a strike occurs on a wrong metal planchet or combined with doubling, the rarity becomes exponential rather than additive, and then there are multiple strike errors, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes with rotation between strikes, creating overlapping images that look almost surreal, and a triple-struck 1985 D quarter with clear rotation and full detail would already be extremely valuable, but if paired with other errors, it could reach legendary status, and broad strikes also play a role in high-value error coins, occurring when a coin is struck without the retaining collar that normally shapes the edge, causing the coin to spread outward and lose its reeded edge, and while broad strikes exist across many years, a broad strike combined with a wrong planchet or double die is extraordinarily rare, and then we must consider die breaks and cuds, which occur when the die develops cracks or missing sections, transferring raised metal blobs onto the coin, and massive cuds that obliterate parts of the design are highly sought after, especially when they appear early in a die's life and are paired with other anomalies. And in extreme cases dies can shatter, creating chaotic patterns of raised metal that make each coin unique, and such dramatic visual impact drives collector interest and value, particularly when the coin remains in high mint state condition, because condition cannot be overstated, as a flawless or near-flawless surface with full original luster, sharp rims, and minimal contact marks can increase value by multiples, not percentages, especially at the top end of the market. And speaking of mint state, the Denver Mint in 1985 produced quarters with varying strike quality, and while many were weakly struck due to worn dies, an exceptionally sharp strike with proof-like field suggests special circumstances, such as polished dies or early die states, and such anomalies add another layer of intrigue. And then there are rotated die errors, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned, and while small rotations are tolerated, extreme rotations approaching 90 or 180 degrees are far rarer and more valuable, and when combined with other errors they become part of the legendary error profile collectors dream about. And one cannot ignore the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most dramatic mint mistakes, where the obverse of one coin is paired with the reverse of another denomination or design. And while no officially confirmed 1985 D-quarter mule has been publicly documented with a radically mismatched reverse, history has proven that mules sometimes surface decades after minting, and if such a coin were found, authenticated, and proven unique, its value would be essentially unlimited within reason, because collectors would be bidding not just on a coin but on a piece of minting history, and provenance would then become critical, because a coin with a documented discovery story, clear chain of ownership, and certification by a top grading service gains legitimacy that fuels competitive bidding, and grading itself is another key factor, because professional third-party authentication protects buyers and establishes market confidence, and a coin certified as genuine, accurately described, and assigned a high grade becomes far more desirable than an uncertified example. And when we talk about values in the millions, certification is not optional, it is essential, and the market dynamics at that level are driven by elite collectors, institutions, and museums, individuals who are willing to pay extraordinary sums for coins that are truly one of a kind, and psychology plays a massive role here, because the desire to own something no one else can own creates bidding wars that push prices far beyond what logic alone would dictate, and this is how legendary valuations are born, not overnight, but through years of discussion, research, speculation, and occasional discovery. And the 1985 D-quarter fits perfectly into this narrative because it represents the idea that treasure can still be hiding in plain sight, that even in modern times, extraordinary mistakes can slip through the system, and that hope keeps collectors searching rolls, weighing coins, checking edges, examining mint marks, and learning about minting processes, because knowledge is the key that turns an ordinary coin into a recognized rarity. And even if the mythical $16,001,985 D-quarter remains hypothetical, the pursuit itself enriches the hobby, educates new collectors, and occasionally leads to genuine discoveries worth life-changing money. And that is why this story continues to captivate, because it reminds us that history is not always locked in museums, sometimes it is sitting quietly in a pocket, waiting for the right eyes to see it. Next, 1973 $quarter coin. Today we are exploring one of the most fascinating and often whispered legends in modern American numismatics, the story of the 1973 Washington $quarter, a coin that most people have spent countless times without ever thinking twice, yet one that under extraordinary and highly specific circumstances has been discussed, theorized, and imagined as being worth up to $15 million, a number so shocking that it instantly captures attention and sparks curiosity. And while that figure represents the extreme edge of rarity, uniqueness, and collector imagination rather than a routine confirmed sale, the foundation for such evaluation lies in the complex and intriguing world of mint errors, production mistakes, transitional anomalies, die varieties, metal composition mysteries, and the powerful psychology of collectors who compete fiercely for coins that are truly one of a kind, because coins are not just money, they are industrial products created by massive machines operating at incredible speed, guided by human hands and human systems, and whenever production reaches that scale, errors become inevitable, and sometimes those errors escape detection, entering circulation where they remain hidden for decades before being rediscovered and reinterpreted through the lens of modern numismatic knowledge. And the year 1973 is particularly interesting because it sits within a turbulent period of American economic history marked by inflation, metal cost concerns, heavy coin production, and evolving mint technology, all of which combined to create conditions where unusual mistakes could and did occur. And to understand how a 1973 quarter could theoretically be valued in the millions, one must first understand that rarity alone is not enough, because value at that level comes from a convergence of rarity, dramatic visual impact, historical context, confirmed authenticity, pristine condition, and compelling story, and one of the most powerful drivers of such value is the wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or metal composition, and while the standard 1973 quarter was supposed to be struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet introduced in the mid-1960s, history has proven that wrong metal strikes do occur, including quarters struck on silver planchets left over from earlier years, experimental alloy blanks, or even planchets intended for foreign coins being produced under contract at U.S. mints, and if a verified 1973 quarter were discovered struck on a silver planchet with full design detail, proper weight deviation, and confirmed mint origin, it would already be worth an extraordinary sum, but if that planchet were something even more unusual, such as an experimental alloy or a precious metal never intended for circulation, the coin would instantly enter legendary territory, because wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable and respected mint errors in existence, especially when the metal itself adds intrinsic value and historical intrigue, and when collectors imagine a $15,001,973 quarter, they often envision exactly this kind of scenario, a coin that should never have existed yet somehow did, surviving against all odds. And then there are double die errors, which are created during the die-making process when the hub impresses the design onto the die more than once in misaligned positions, resulting in visible doubling on the finished coin. And double dies are especially prized because they are not the result of damage or wear but are true minting errors that originate at the very beginning of the production process, and a strong double die obverse on a 1973 quarter affecting Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or Washington's profile would be instantly recognizable, and if the doubling were dramatic enough to be seen with the naked eye, it would generate enormous collector interest, and the value would multiply further if the die were retired quickly, limiting the number of surviving examples, because rarity on that scale drives competition among collectors who specialize in elite error coins. And even more extraordinary would be a double die reverse combined with a double die obverse, a combination so rare that it would instantly elevate the coin into a class of its own. And beyond double dies there are dramatic strike errors, such as off-center strikes where the design is not properly centered on the planchet. And while small off-center errors are relatively common and modestly valued, extreme off-center strikes exceeding 50% while still showing the full date and mint mark are far rarer and far more valuable, especially when the coin remains uncirculated. And then there are multiple strike errors, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes with rotation or misalignment between strikes, creating overlapping designs that appear almost surreal. And a triple-struck 1973 quarter with clear rotation, strong detail, and minimal damage would already be highly valuable, but if combined with other errors such as a wrong planchet or double die, the rarity becomes exponential rather than incremental. And broad strike errors also play a role in the mythology of high-value coins, occurring when a coin is struck without the retaining collar that normally shapes the edge, causing the metal to spread outward and lose its reeded edge. And while broad strikes are known across many years, a broad strike on a wrong planchet or paired with dramatic doubling would be extraordinarily rare. And then there are die breaks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when a die cracks or a piece of it breaks away, transferring raised metal onto the coin surface, and massive cuds that obliterate significant portions of the design are highly sought after, especially when they appear early in a die's life and are visually striking. And in extreme cases, dies can shatter, producing chaotic raised patterns that make each coin essentially unique, and uniqueness is the holy grail of numismatics, because when only one example is known, value becomes limited only by what the most passionate collector is willing to pay, and condition amplifies all of this, because a coin with multiple errors that is heavily worn loses much of its appeal, whereas a mint state or near-perfect example with full original luster, sharp rims, minimal contact marks, and strong strike quality becomes a museum-worthy artifact, and condition can multiply value by factors rather than percentages, particularly when dealing with already rare errors, and the 1973 quarter was produced at multiple mints, including Philadelphia and Denver, each with its own production environment, and this opens the door to mint-specific anomalies such as missing mint marks, repunched mint marks, or misplaced mint marks, and while such errors are rarer on quarters than on some other denominations, their existence is documented, and a 1973 quarter with a dramatic mint mark error combined with other anomalies would be especially desirable, and then there are rotated die errors, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned beyond normal tolerances, and while minor rotations are common and often ignored, extreme rotations approaching 90 or even 180 degrees are far rarer and more valuable, especially when combined with other errors, and one cannot ignore the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most dramatic mistakes the mint can make, where the obverse die of one coin is paired with the reverse die of another denomination or design, and while no officially confirmed 1973 quarter mule with a radically mismatched reverse has been widely recognized, history has proven that mules sometimes surface decades after minting, completely rewriting what collectors thought they knew, and if such a coin were discovered, authenticated, and proven unique, its value would be almost impossible to cap, because collectors would not just be bidding on a coin but on a singular piece of minting history, and provenance would then become critically important, because a coin with a documented discovery story, clear chain of ownership, and certification by a top-tier grading service gains legitimacy that fuels competitive bidding, and professional grading and authentication are absolutely essential at this level, because multi-million-dollar coins require absolute confidence in authenticity, error classification, and condition, and once a coin is encapsulated and described by a respected grading service, it becomes part of the official numismatic record, and market psychology takes over, because elite collectors, institutions, and museums begin to compete for ownership, and psychology plays an enormous role in these valuations, because the desire to own something that no one else can own drives bidding wars that push prices far beyond what logic alone might suggest, and this is how legendary valuations are born, not overnight, but through years of discussion, research, speculation, and occasional discovery, and the 1973 quarter fits perfectly into this narrative because it represents the tantalizing idea that even in modern times, extraordinary treasures can still be hiding in plain sight, that mistakes made decades ago can still surface today, and that knowledge and persistence can transform an ordinary coin into a life-changing discovery, and this belief keeps collectors searching rolls, examining old collections, weighing coins, checking edges, studying lettering under magnification, and learning about minting processes so they can recognize anomalies when they appear, and even if the mythical $15,001,973 quarter remains hypothetical. Last. 1983 quarter dollar coin. Today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and widely discussed modern coin legends in American numismatics, the incredible story of the 1983 Washington quarter dollar, a coin that most people have spent without hesitation, dropped into vending machines, tossed into jars, or ignored in pocket change, yet one that under extraordinarily rare and specific circumstances has been talked about, theorized, and imagined as being worth up to $14 million. A number so shocking that it instantly captures attention and sparks curiosity across the coin collecting world, and while that figure represents the extreme edge of possibility rather than a commonly confirmed sale price, the reasons behind such a massive valuation lie in a powerful combination of minting errors, production mistakes, transitional anomalies, material irregularities, die varieties, survival rarity, and the psychology of collectors who are willing to pay staggering sums for coins that are truly unique, because coins are not just money, they are industrial products made at incredible speed using massive machinery operated by people, and whenever production happens at that scale, especially during periods of economic pressure and high demand, mistakes are inevitable, and sometimes those mistakes escape detection and enter circulation, where they can remain hidden for decades before being rediscovered and re-evaluated with modern knowledge and technology. And the year 1983 is especially important in this discussion because it was a critical period for the United States Mint, a time when metal costs were rising sharply, production demands were enormous, and cost-cutting measures were actively being explored, creating a perfect storm for unusual errors and anomalies to occur. And to understand how a 1983 P quarter could theoretically reach a value in the millions, one must understand that such value does not come from a single small mistake, but from a convergence of extreme rarity, dramatic error combinations, historical significance, pristine condition, verified authenticity, and a compelling story that captures the imagination of elite collectors. And one of the most important factors driving such high theoretical value is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, metal composition, or even a foreign coin. And while the standard 1983 P quarter was supposed to be struck on a copper-nickel-clad planchet weighing approximately 5.67 grams, history has proven that wrong metal strikes do happen, including quarters struck on silver planchets, experimental alloy blanks, or planchets intended for other denominations or foreign contracts. And 1983 is particularly intriguing because the Mint was actively dealing with metal shortages and experimenting with alternative materials during this era, and if a verified 1983 P quarter were discovered struck on a solid silver planchet, an experimental alloy, or an otherwise unauthorized metal with full design detail, proper strike characteristics, and confirmed mint origin, it would instantly become one of the most important error coins in U.S. history, and such a discovery alone could justify a multi-million-dollar valuation due to its uniqueness. And collectors often imagine the $14,001,983 quarter as exactly this type of coin, something that was never supposed to exist but somehow did, surviving against all odds. And then there is the added intrigue surrounding 1983 coinage because this was a year when the U.S. Mint did not produce official uncirculated mint sets for collectors, which means that high-grade circulation strikes from this year are far scarcer than from surrounding years. And this scarcity of pristine examples dramatically increases the value of any major error coin from 1983, because condition plays an enormous role in valuation, and a rare error in worn condition is far less valuable than the same error preserved in near-perfect mint state. And when collectors imagine a legendary 1983 P quarter worth millions, they imagine a coin with blazing original luster, sharp rims, minimal contact marks, and strong strike quality, something that looks almost proof-like despite being a business strike. And condition like that from 1983 is already rare even without errors. And then there are double die errors, which occur during the die creation process when the hub impresses the design onto the die more than once in slightly misaligned positions, resulting in visible doubling on the finished coin. And double dies are especially valuable because they are true mint errors created before any coins are struck, not the result of damage or wear. And a strong double die obverse on a 1983 P quarter affecting Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or Washington's portrait would immediately attract intense collector interest, especially if the doubling were bold enough to be seen without magnification. And if that double die were paired with a double die reverse, the rarity would increase dramatically, because coins showing strong doubling on both sides are exceptionally rare, and rarity at that level drives values into entirely different territory. And beyond double dies there are dramatic strike errors to consider, such as off-center strikes where the design is not properly centered on the planchet. And while small off-center errors are relatively common, extreme off-center strikes exceeding 50% while still showing the full date and mint mark are far rarer and far more valuable. And if such an off-center strike occurred on a wrong planchet or double die, the rarity becomes exponential rather than additive. And then there are multiple strike errors, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes with rotation or misalignment between strikes, creating overlapping images that look chaotic and visually stunning. And a triple-struck 1983 P quarter with clear rotation and minimal post-strike damage would already be a major numismatic prize, but when combined with other errors, it becomes the kind of coin collectors dream about and talk about for decades. And broad strike errors also play a role in high-value error discussions, occurring when a coin is struck without the retaining collar that normally shapes the edge, allowing the metal to spread outward and lose its reeded edge, and while broad strikes exist. Across many years, a broad strike combined with a wrong planchet, double die, or multiple strike error would be extraordinarily rare, and then there are die breaks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when a die cracks or a portion of it breaks away, transferring raised metal blobs onto the coin surface, and massive cuds that obscure major design elements are highly desirable, especially when they appear early in the die's life and are visually dramatic, and in extreme cases dies can shatter, producing chaotic raised patterns that make each coin effectively unique, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of extreme value, because when only one example is known or believed to exist, price becomes limited only by what the most determined collector is willing to pay, and the Philadelphia Mint in 1983 was producing enormous quantities of quarters under intense pressure, which increases the likelihood of die fatigue, cracks, misalignments, and other mechanical failures, and this production environment fuels the belief that extraordinary errors could have occurred and escaped detection, and then there are rotated die errors, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned beyond normal tolerances, and while minor rotations are common, extreme rotations approaching 90 or even 180 degrees are far rarer and far more valuable, especially when paired with other major errors. And one of the most dramatic and rare possibilities discussed by collectors is the mule error, where the obverse die of one coin is paired with the reverse die of another denomination or design, and while no widely recognized 1983 p-quarter mule has been officially confirmed, history has shown that mule errors can surface decades after minting, completely rewriting what was previously thought possible, and if such a coin were discovered, authenticated, and proven unique, its value would be virtually impossible to cap, because collectors would be bidding on a singular piece of minting history rather than just a coin, and provenance would then become critical, because a coin with a well-documented discovery story, clear chain of ownership, and certification by a top-tier grading service gains legitimacy and market confidence, and professional grading and authentication are absolutely essential at this level, because multi-million-dollar coins require unquestionable trust in authenticity, error classification, and condition, and once a coin is encapsulated and described by a respected grading service, it becomes part of the official numismatic record, and market psychology takes over, because elite collectors, institutions, and museums begin to compete for ownership, and psychology plays an enormous role in these valuations, because the desire to own something no one else can own fuels bidding wars that push prices far beyond traditional logic. And this is how legendary valuations are born, not overnight, but through years of discussion, research, speculation, and the occasional discovery that confirms long-held theories, and the 1983 p-quarter fits perfectly into this narrative because it represents the idea that even in modern times, incredible treasures can still be hiding in plain sight, that mistakes made decades ago can still surface today, and that knowledge and persistence